One interesting fact is that the fastest paced team during that 2012-2013 season was the Houston Rockets, led by James Harden, Jeremy Lin, and Chandler Parsons. And funny enough, their pace at 96.89 is the same, is eerily similar to the pace of the 76ers in this season at 96.41.
And that's
So
with all the free throws.
yeah. So James Harden hasn't really lost a step when you think about it. He's playing at the same pace as he was 10 years ago. It's just that the rest of the league has sped up and is basically in front of him now. So I thought that was a really interesting.
Let me put you on game.
Moving on, there has been an interesting trend in the league as of late, and guys have been putting up numbers. If you go back 9 seasons, only 9 players scored more than 20 points per game on average. This is the 2012-2013 season. This season, that number has jumped to about 29 players. The 3-ball has a lot to do with it, and so does pace, but also team possessions have gone up, and the pace of the game is just a lot faster. 12 players have scored 50 plus points this season, and it's been done 17 times this season now. Embiid and Giannis were the only two to accomplish it with less than 2 threes made. So it's not just guys are jacking up threes, and that's why they're able to score so much. There's a well-roundedness to the way that guys are able to put up points in the league right now. And it's really been interesting. What are your thoughts on this scoring boom that we're seeing in the league right now?
I have an optimistic and a pessimistic view of it. I'll say from an optimistic standpoint, it is incredibly refreshing to see the amount of players that have that level of talent in the league. Even you got, Saddiq Bey putting up 50, even though he's a nice player. He's a really good role player in the NBA, but 50 points is not the status quo for him by any means or expected at all. So to see him do that, it's pretty amazing. And then you have guys like Kyrie, who, despite playing, you could probably half his stats, and he's still really good right now, considering he's playing half the games. Recently, he's just been putting up numbers on really elite efficiency. I think he had a true shooting percentage that was over like 100% in one of these games, which is basically, it's breaking the metric essentially. So it's ridiculous what he's doing. Because yes, a 60% true shooting percentage is great. So 100% is like, it's almost unfathomable. It's a unfathomable level of like efficiency, but yeah, he's doing it at an elite level. You have a guy like Cat putting up numbers. We always thought he could put up a night like that, but to see him do it is incredible. And then you look at something like the MVP race and how many guys are in it, and how many guys that are bigs are in at the top 3 with Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid, arguably, because people will argue putting other people in there. But those, I think that's the consensus top 3. They're all bigs. So the level of talent in the front court, of course, you got a ton of point guards putting up numbers, great wings. So it's just a great time in the league to be a fan. And I think the scoring boom is kind of a result of that, because you have guys that are in the NBA, as Luka Doncic would say, that are essentially unguardable. So you can kind of just do whatever you will with them, but they're just going to get what they want. So that's the optimistic side of it. It's a pleasure to be a basketball fan and see all of this talent in the league. The pessimistic view of it is, I do think that statistics now are a little bit skewed towards higher scoring games. Like you said, because of the faster pace, the steadily increasing diet of 3-pointers that players are jacking up and hitting at, unprecedented rates. And then the rule adjustment where defenders aren't allowed to be as physical. There was some physicality at the beginning of the year, I think, a little bit more, less foul baiting and stuff like that. But I think it's kind of regressing towards the mean in that regard. And a big thing that I think no one talks about is there isn't the presence of 2 big men in the lane anymore to deter at rim finishing. Like you typically have most teams starting 1 traditional big and starting a big wing at the 4. So there's not a traditional center and power forward to deter at rim finishing anymore. I was watching this video by Thinking Basketball where he was dissecting LeBron's career, and from, his early Cavs days to Heat to return to Cavs to Lakers and all of that, and just looking at how he scored the basketball during different eras of his career and how much that's changed, and basically analyzing like, how is LeBron still so effective? And one of the reasons LeBron is still so effective is if you look at him driving to the rim early on in his career, a lot of times he had to drive to the rim and he would have to stop and take like a contested turnaround because there was like two big men waiting for him in the lane. So it's like, oh, well, that's not a good shot. So I have to turn around and try to get something else. But now in the NBA with one big in there, it's a lot easier to get in there and to get your points around the rim when there isn't that deterrent. So like if you look at I was even thinking about like Ja Morant versus Derrick Rose, right?
Right.
They're comparing Ja and his season this year because he's a top 5 or 6 MVP candidate depending on who you're talking to, and they're comparing his statistics to Derrick Rose's MVP season. So outside of Derrick having the edge with assists, if you look at Ja's stats, they're better. He's scoring, I think, more points. He's also scoring at a more efficient rate. But a lot of that is because he's able to get to the rim at will because there isn't as much of a deterrent, even as there was 10 years ago. So if you take a guy like Derrick Rose now and you put him in today's league, that I think he averaged like almost 26 a game his MVP year. That 26 a game turns into 28 or 29 because of the way that he's being defended on the perimeter and also the way that he's being defended in the paint when he gets there. So he would have a lot easier of a time scoring and he would be taking more threes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that 26 or 27 turns to 28 or 29. So it's like, yes, I love the talent in the league, but you also have to adjust the level of scoring when it comes to how much the game has changed and kind of favors offensive players now. Not that it's a horrible thing because it makes for a more aesthetically pleasing game in a lot of ways. I love seeing Ja dunk on the singular big man or a 360 layup or alley-oop or reverse or all the crazy stuff that he does, but it would be a lot less possible if basketball was played the way that it was a while ago.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you brought up. What's interesting as well when it comes to the scoring is that in 2019, I think we're just seeing an era of more guys being able to put up these numbers. 2019, there was the 50-point mark was actually done 22 times that year, which is more than this year so far. We still have, an average 12 to 13 games left in the regular season for a lot of these teams. I'm not sure if that mark will be topped this year, but I just think the overall skill of the league has improved along with less deterrence at the rim. And the amount of top players that there are in the league. Last week we were talking about Roy Hibbert making an all-star selection, just a decade ago, and that not being the case now. One interesting fact is that the fastest paced team during that 2012-2013 season was the Houston Rockets, led by James Harden, Jeremy Lin, and Chandler Parsons. And funny enough, their pace at 96.89 is eerily similar to the pace of the 76ers in this season at 96.41.
So that's with all the free throws.
Yeah. So James Harden hasn't really lost a step when you think about it. He's playing at the same pace as he was 10 years ago. It's just that the rest of the league has sped up behind, and is basically in front of him now. So I thought that was a really interesting and telling fact as to how much the league has changed and how much certain guys have influenced it, but other guys have just taken off with it. A la, you got the Timberwolves who are leading the league in pace at the moment right now. So
for sure. Yeah, I'm sure, I don't know the stats, but I'm sure if you look at the Sixers now, like you just made that comparison to the Rockets of, 10 years ago, I'm sure the Sixers are like a middle of the pack or like bottom of the league level pace team because of the amount of free throws they shoot, right?
Bottom three.
Yeah. So like that compared to like that Houston Rockets offense was considered like high octane back in the day. So that shows you the change of pace. Or even like the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns. That team was considered to be playing at a blistering pace, but they're probably bottom of the league too right now. If you take that team and what they did and put that now, and they were considered to be like revolutionary in terms of how fast that they were playing. So it's definitely changed a lot, but it's also changed out of necessity in a lot of ways. I think that if you put two big men on the floor right now, you're going to get played off of it. Like you can't put two Rudy Goberts out there. Like you're gonna get embarrassed. So like you can do it for small stretches with certain teams, but that can't be your game plan because they're just going to pick and roll you to death. And there's nothing you can do about it. If you have two bigs, you have to have someone that's capable at the four of defending multiple positions. So it's out of necessity, but it's also taking the game to a place where it's extremely offensively oriented.